My name is Alex, and I'm a philosophy major at Trinity University in San Antonio, Texas. I was lucky enough to have taken a philosophy class while I was still in high school. So unlike most people who come to college and take an introduction to philosophy class for a common humanities program or a common curriculum program, I had already come to college knowing that I wanted to do philosophy. So when I came here, when I was looking for schools, I looked for schools that had a good philosophy program, and when I got here, it was just sort of natural for me to continue on with philosophy. When it comes to the kinds of courses that you'll most likely be taking in a philosophy department, really the biggest difference between two or more courses is the content that's covered in the course. So, for example, you might take a class on metaphysics, you might take a class on epistemology, you might take a class on ancient philosophy, you might take a class on aesthetics, and so on. And really the difference there is just the content that's being covered. For the most part, the structure of any philosophy class is going to be pretty uniform. Your professor is going to assign you readings, you're going to do the readings, you're going to come to class. If it's a particularly difficult reading, you'll probably go over the reading in some detail so everyone in the class understands it. If it isn't, you'll probably spend less time doing this, and then at some point in the class period, you're going to critically discuss whatever you've just read. So that's sort of the outline for a typical philosophy class. In addition to what you'll do daily, so this homework routine of reading, coming to class, discussing, you'll also usually be asked to write one or two papers asking you to evaluate some of the arguments that you've considered over the semester, maybe identify some problems you think it has, maybe if you see a better way of handling a problem, you could write about that in a paper. But at least in my experiences, those have been the two central focuses of my philosophy classes. There's the focus on understanding the ideas, discussing them critically in class, and then there's the focus on writing and being able to really engage with the ideas of the philosophers that you're reading. My favorite part about being a philosophy major is just the amount of new and interesting ideas that I get to that I'm exposed to on a regular basis. I mean, the reason that a lot of people become interested in philosophy is they'll take a class like Introduction to Philosophy, and they'll just be fascinated by all of the discussions and debates that philosophers have had throughout history. And for me, that sort of passion has never gone away. So even now as a senior, when I take upper division philosophy classes, it's still on a daily basis that I'm getting introduced to new ideas that I have to think critically about and come to an understanding about and develop my own opinions about, and that's always been extremely rewarding for me. The hardest part about being a philosophy major, or at least for me, is sort of the pressure of trying to say something intelligent about a philosophical question or debate that's been ongoing for, centuries, decades. It doesn't matter really how long the period is, but especially as an undergraduate, you're reading the work of professional philosophers and ancient philosophers, sort of the greats of philosophy, and then you're asked to sort of look at their arguments and evaluate them and maybe even put forth your own argument. And for me, it's always been difficult to view myself as being able to make a valuable contribution to this dialogue. I mean, especially earlier on as a freshman or a sophomore, when you're reading the great philosophers and you're asked to then comment on their work, it's a sort of humbling experience. You're not really sure what you could possibly say. But as you go on through the major and you take more classes, it's really rewarding to actually get to the point where you think that you might be able to have something to say, then you're starting to see that there are points of attack that you can make against particular positions, even if they've been held by some of the smartest people that have ever lived. So that's really rewarding in its own right. If there's any advice that I could give to younger students, it would be to not just limit yourself to philosophy. Very little that happens in philosophy is sort of philosophy in a vacuum. Me personally, I do aesthetics, so for me, I have to go out, I have to watch movies, listen to music, pay attention to artworks. And it's the same thing for other fields in philosophy too. So if you're interested in ancient philosophy, head out to the classics department, take some language classes, take some history classes, really get to know the environment that the ancient philosophers were working in. If you're interested in the philosophy of mind, take some psychology classes, get to know some of the science behind how the mind interacts with the body and stuff like that. If you're interested in the philosophy of science, obviously you're going to have to know some science. And it's like that for pretty much every branch of philosophy. I mean, philosophy is never done in a vacuum, so as much outside information as you can bring in is going to be helpful. And at least in my experience, some of the most rewarding discussions that I've had in class and out of class when it comes to philosophical topics has been with people that have been able to bring in their knowledge of other fields and other sources of information, and that's really sort of opened my mind to what else might be possible when discussing a subject philosophically. And really, any subject can be discussed philosophically. You could have a philosophy of anything. So having a philosophical training will help you with any other field that you might go into. I mean, there's always going to be interesting questions about fields like chemistry, biology, science in general, arts, anything like that. Anything that you're interested in, you can apply philosophy to it and think about it critically. And I've always enjoyed doing that. There's one thing that younger students can do to prepare for being a philosophy major. It's to really start slowing down when they read. So the homework that you'll get in philosophy will most likely not be like the homework you get in other classes. For the most part, if you're reading a journal article or anything like that, you're not going to have more than 15 or so pages of reading per class period. And that doesn't sound like a lot, but philosophical writing is much denser than writing in other fields. There's many more ideas packed into a very small amount of space. And if you read quickly, you're just going to miss a lot of those ideas, a lot of the nuance in those arguments. So if there's one thing that I can really stress, it's that start reading things closely, start reading things slowly, and really try to pick up on all the details that are occurring in the argument that you're reading. And that's really all I have. I hope that's helped in some sense. These are sort of the things that I have to pass on after being a philosophy major for 4 years. It's been extremely rewarding for me, and I hope that if you choose to pursue philosophy, that some of the advice that I've given you will help.